Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Hi.
What I would like to talk about is...
Fine.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Jonathan, work at intellectEU, and we're focused as a company on how we can enable emerging technology in the regulated industries. And what I would like to present today is our Catalyst operating system, and doing that by showcasing a DVP solution where we will have settlement orchestrated on one system. The assets will live on another distributed ledger technology, and then payment will happen over fiat rails such as Target Services, SWIFT, and wholesale CBDC. Now, building up to this event and over the past months, I've been reading through quite a few papers and trying to find what are the different patterns that are happening in the industry. And one thing that stood out was a definition of the Bundesbank on how they define money and where they set a payment instrument. On the one hand, it needs to be stable, but also it needs to be universally convertible into other forms of money, and it needs to happen with as little friction as possible. And I found it to be very interesting, and we'll come back in the next couple of slides as well. And then a few examples of the most forms of money that are being used right now. Now, what we see happening in parallel with blockchain technology is that we're currently more in the foundational stage, where we moved away from let's use technology because of a hype, but let's really see what is the value that distributed ledger technology can provide. And a few examples here from a study from the Value Exchange, where about 1.3 billion in US dollars of live digital bonds has been issued. But also if you look, for example, in the US, what's happening with Broadridge, where they're handling about $1 trillion on their platform of dollars. And while those numbers might be very minimal, if you look at the bigger picture, it showcases us that we are really moving in from really driving a fundamental shift of what technology can bring and help us to bring synchronous processes together. So those are a bit of the two things I was seeing happening in parallel. Now, a good paper that also came out from Euroclear, Clearstream, and DTCC that showcased, okay, we are currently more in the defining the fundamental stage, but what is needed to drive this to adoption? And there are a few challenges that come into play, where the three main ones that we were seeing was the infrastructure management that is needed, and it also was presented in another presentation this morning where we're talking about the highways, where the infrastructure management is a very important one. Secondly, it's the operational resilience. When this is running in production, how do we do the management of really the core technical systems that are needed, and how do we ensure that this can really run in a production grade environment? But also very importantly is that integration part. And that brings me back to that first definition of a payment instrument, where different forms of money, they need to be readily convertible into other forms, and it needs to happen with as little friction as possible. Now, these were the challenges that we see and also were presented in that paper, is how to move from foundational stage really into adoption stage. And again, we're moving from using technology because of a hype to really now having proven that this technology can deliver value. Now the challenge is, how do we bring that into production? Where there's regulatory aspects, there's the business value of it, but also we have the technical aspect. And that's exactly what we want to cover with Catalyst, is how do we abstract away those technical pain points and really allow us to focus on what is the business value and how do we move from conceptual stage really into production. So Catalysts we define as an operating system, which consists of a blockchain manager, which is then more how do we deploy and manage the infrastructure, but also the integration manager side, which is more for the interoperability, connecting legacy systems with blockchain systems, but also then the different payment rails. So if I had to present Catalyst in one visual, then this would be the one I would pull up, where you really have to see it as that layer that sits on top of the infrastructure that helps us to manage the infrastructure underneath, provide that operational resiliency, and now also provide that connectivity and interoperability and make sure that this all happens seamlessly. Now, that's a bit of the background. What I would love to do is showcase that in a demonstration. The video will come in a bit, but first to give some background on what we will showcase. So we will showcase a DVP that is going to happen on one distributed ledger technology called Canton, where it will be orchestrated. The assets that will be settled live on an EVM chain. That could be Hyperledger Besu or Polygon. But then actually the settlement will happen on a fiat rail, which could then be SWIFT, Target Services, or a wholesale CBDC on Hyperledger Fabric. And where Catalyst comes in is really facilitating that operational part, the infrastructure management, but also that seamless connectivity and integration between those different systems. And then I'll showcase the video in a bit, but just to give some background on what our vision is with Catalyst and how we want to position it in that whole ecosystem is really making sure that we can have seamless connectivity and integration, so that we allow for different systems that live on different blockchain technologies or distributed ledger technologies to allow that connectivity to instantly settle different payment instruments. And that's also very interesting, as last 2 weeks, the European Commission came out with a push for instant payments. And how can we connect now those different more emerging technology systems with those payment rails as well? We also firmly believe in standards. So it's really making sure, okay, if an instruction is issued on one system, how can we easily transfer and convert that into those standards, ISO 22, that then can be sent to different payment rails? And really making sure how can we provide that compatibility with different global market systems. So how do we allow really Catalyst as an operating system to easily integrate with different systems, as we see that the whole financial service industry is growing more into different networks, different payment rails, and we need a solution that can help us to drive to production, to can accelerate that adoption, but also move forward and connect all of that. I might need some help, so while the video is being set up, what we will showcase in the first 3 minutes here.
Is there audio?
No. What we'll showcase in the first 3 minutes, and bear with me, it might be a bit technical, but it's just for 2 minutes, is how we will actually deploy all the necessary components. So what you'll see here is our Catalyst Blockchain Manager, which allows us to very easily set up a Canton domain or a Canton network, and then the necessary participants. So as you can see here, we are really streamlining that whole process, providing maximum automation, but still the highest degree of configurability as well. So this streamlines the whole process and abstracts away the pain points of technical implementation and allows us to focus what is the business value that at the end of the day we want to bring. So what you're seeing here is that we are creating our domain, which then can be seen as the network where the different participants will live on. So as I was showcasing in the first picture, you see Bank 1, the CSD, which could also be a register, and then Bank 2. And what we're doing right now is we're setting up that network. We're creating the different participants, and the UI that you're seeing is a bit speeded up, but that showcases more on how we could easily deploy the different components. So what we're doing right now is we're looking at the participant that lives on Ledger. Again, bear with me, it's a bit technical for 2 minutes, but it's just to showcase how we streamline that whole process of now also creating the different parties on the network. So what I'm showcasing right now is that how we can deploy the orchestration smart contract, which will then is for the CSD. So that is right now being deployed. Once we have that done, you can see here the network is up and running. We will now connect that one participant to that network that was set up. As you can see here, it's a matter of a few clicks. And what we have now done is we set up that, I'll call it a blockchain node, that participant that is connected to the network that was created, which will do the orchestration of the DVP. And now what we're doing is creating those different parties on the network. So we created Bank 1, we are creating Bank 2, and now we're creating the CSD. Now these parties are what I would call the legal representation that would live on the ledger. Bit of background right now, we are just linking that to the technical user, so we're just linking that up. And then what will happen is those 3 participants, they will be involved in that whole orchestration process of DVP. So this part, a bit more streamed up just to move forward to the actual demo. But once this is done, you can see that we've created the domain, which is the network. We've created the participant, which is then more the legal representation on that network. And now what we've done as the final step is actually deploy the application. So what I will showcase right now is how we will have settlement happening of one asset that lives on the EVM chain and the payment that will happen on a fiat rail, so over Swift. Here you can see the dashboard that a Bank 1 may have, where if you click into more details of the trade, you can see the current status. So it was not submitted or initiated yet, but you can see already some information of the asset address, which you can see on the right. You can see what is the currency that you want to settle. But now if you move into the CSD, we can see what are the different trades that have been programmed up front. And we will now submit one of those trades for actual settlement. And we'll start with the one that will settle over Swift and target services. And as we will go into the details, you will see actually the different steps that will take place, where the first step is we will deploy an escrow contract on an EVM chain that will then be used for the assets of the seller to be placed in escrow. So right now we are deploying that contract in the background, which will take a few seconds. Then once that's happened, you will see that the status will be moved to transfer to escrow, which means that asset that we want to trade will be placed in an escrow account on, again, a different distributed ledger technology. Then what will happen is as soon as that asset is transferred into escrow, as you can see right now, the payment will be initiated. So there will be an instruction sent from one system, from that EVM chain, to secondary system, which is then Swift network, where we use Swift Alliance access for that, and then also connect to target services. You can see a bit of the different steps that are taken, and happy to showcase that with a bit more time afterwards, and even show our live system. So you can see here the status that the payment was executed. As soon as the payment got executed, again, a trigger will be sent to that escrow contract to then release that asset that lived on the EVM chain to the buyer. Now, all nice and well to see it in different statuses, but here you can actually see the block explorer, and you can see that escrow contract where we go a bit more in detail. We can see that asset that was first deposited by the seller. And then once the payment happened, that asset then also got released from the escrow account to the address of the buyer. You can see the different details in our dashboard. So the token address is the address of the asset that we traded here. So what you actually saw in the past 5 minutes is how we speed a little bit up, but how to deploy all the infrastructure, and then how also to execute that DVP. What I'm showcasing now is that the payment actually happened on the Swift network. So if you look at the dashboard from Swift Alliance Access, what we can do is we can do search, and we can actually put in that keyword of that specific ID. And then you will see that the payment actually happens. So what happens in the background is as soon as that instruction is sent from one EVM network, inside of Catalyst, we will create that ISO 2002 message, which is a PAX 008 message, which holds all the instructions for payment. That payment will then be sent to the Swift network. We could specify the service name in there as well, which means we can connect to different target systems, target services as well. And then we will get a response, a confirmation of payment back in the form of a track 001 message that actually showcases that the payment was happened. Now, this all happens in the background, and where Catalyst helps is to connect those different systems, but even create the necessary standards from it. Allows us to have messages from one system sent to another system. So we go back to bank one now. We can see that that specific trade was being settled. And you can see, okay, what is the bank address, what was the escrow address, and the different steps that have been taken. So what we showcased again is how Catalyst streamlined that whole journey of deploying it, but also how that settlement happened in the background. Now, what we're going to do now is, instead of having the payment happen over Swift or target services, have the payment or the settlement happen over a wholesale CBDC, where again, we submitted now the trade for settlement. You can see that is in progress. It's again the same steps. We first deploy the escrow contract on the EVM chain. Once that is done, we will send the instructions for the seller to bring or to deposit that asset into that escrow account, so it is being locked. Again, what Catalyst facilitates is that whole communication between the different systems. So once it is in escrow, the instruction will be sent to initiate the payment, which will be on Hyperledger Fabric on the wholesale CBDC that we've deployed. The process will also happen a bit more quicker than over Swift, as you can see, as we're using distributed ledger technology. So the payment got executed. As soon as the payment got executed on Hyperledger Fabric on that network, we send an instruction to that escrow account on EVM to release the assets to the buyer, and the payment has been executed, where we did a change of one asset and did the settlement over wholesale CBDC. Again, if you go into the escrow address, you can see that the asset got deposited and got sent to the buyer address. I will showcase next is if you go inside, so you can see the security address. We'll click in a bit on the wholesale CBDC just to also showcase that this actually happened on Hyperledger Fabric. So what you'll see now is, again, our Catalyst blockchain manager, where we can easily query the ledger as well. So what we'll do is we'll check what is the balance of bank 1 and bank 2. And what you will see is that bank 1 will have a balance of 100,150 because the assets that we wanted to settle, we needed the payment of about 150 in the currency of using wholesale CBDC. And then bank 2 would actually had to pay for it, that got deducted. Again, finally going back to the dashboard of bank 1, we can see that we now settled 2 trades, one using fiat payment rails, the other using a wholesale CBDC. And all of that was, on the one hand, facilitated with Catalyst, where Catalyst helped with the infrastructure management of all the different components, being it the EVM network, being it the Canton network, where we can orchestrate that whole DVP, and also provide that connectivity from those different systems. So again, what we just showcased in a matter of minutes is how easy Catalyst facilitates the deployment, how Catalyst allows us to connect those different systems and provide that interoperability and integration, and most importantly, being it with traditional payment systems, but also with wholesale CBDCs that might live on DLT. And where it's really the vision of Catalyst is how can we accelerate the evolution of global markets? How can we bring to adoption what the whole digital asset space, and how can we connect those legacy systems? How can we connect those different network types? And how can we connect, okay, what's moving forward? I see there's 2.5 minutes left, so happy to answer any questions, but I'll stay with this slide just to give an overview of what we've just showcased and the gap that we aim to fill in with Catalyst. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Jonathan? Maybe.
Yeah, a little bit. Can you expand a little bit on the infrastructure? How is it built? Is it like hosted in some cloud, or is it possible to deploy it on premises? Is it like labeled?
Yeah. So the question was, how does the deployment aspect work? Is it something that we host? Does it allow for flexibility on premises? And there, the answer, like something we did when we developed Catalyst, is we want to make sure that we have no cloud vendor lock-in. So this means this can be deployed on premises, this can be deployed on any cloud. It could also be provided by intellectEU or another party as a service. So it's really focused on how do we create that flexibility from different parties, because we believe that on the one hand, there will be different networks that need to be supported, but also different infrastructure types. And as a financial institutions, you need to have control over your system and your infrastructure as well, because of data compliance, and you want to have some control over the network, especially with what's being pushed now in terms of regulatory.
Other questions? Perfect, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, on a very nice presentation. You mentioned that your system is running on the EVM blockchain, right? Is it interoperable for other blockchain, non-EVM?
Yes. So Catalyst right now, as you can see, it supports Canton. So that was where we orchestrated the DVP. The wholesale CBDC lived on Hyperledger Fabric, again, also supported by Catalyst. On the EVM side, we have Hyperledger Besu and Polygon. And then the 2 other ones that we support are R3 Corda and Stellar.
Stellar.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks.
Right. I don't think we have any questions from the online audience as well. And
there is one last question from the online.
Okay.
So it does not work when you're offline, right? This is a question from the online audience.
Completely offline, no, because you need to facilitate connectivity between systems. But the system is event-driven, which means if one of the aspects goes offline, it will just wait until the system goes up again, and then it will facilitate. So we have that resiliency in place.
Perfect. Then I think we're perfectly on time. 10 seconds left. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.